Hey guys, Clipper here, and welcome back to the channel. Thanks for stopping by. You may or may not have noticed already, but I actually have a real freaking mic this time, so hopefully the audio will be a little easier to hear for you and easier to process for me. Alright, so to quickly recap what happened last time, we opened the game, picked a character, and did damn near nothing. So to get us warmed up for today, we're just gonna go over the Traveler's little monologue before actually jumping into their conversation with Paimon.
이렇게 낯선 신이 내 동생을 데려갔어. 나도 신에 의해 원래의 힘을 잃었고, 그렇게 여러 세상을 넘나들었던 우리는 이곳에 묶이게 됐지.
Yeah, I'll be real. My brain kinda glazed over on my first pass, so before actually going through it, I maybe only caught like this much. It's really freaking sad. I hate it when I see a lot of Korean text like this, my brain just short circuits and goes, "Yeah, what do the lines mean?" Then again, it does that for English too, so I really shouldn't complain. Alright, so jumping right in, we see the travelers start with 이렇게, which means in this way, referencing the events of the last episode. We can actually see on the third line down it starts with 그렇게, which you may be able to guess means in that way. Moving right along, not Sunshine refers to the unknown god, and then we have this chunk, 내 동생, which means my younger sibling. You can actually specify younger brothers and younger sisters by saying 남동생 and 여동생, but as we can see here, it's not particularly critical. Again, 데려가다 you don't really need to write down. If it's important, we'll see it again later. So, putting the first line all together, we get something like, this is how the unknown god took away my younger sibling. Okay, so moving down to the next line, let's start with the chunk 나도 신에 의해. 도 is used as to or also, so I'm thinking of 나도 as I also. 의하다 is due to, and you'll notice that it needs to be connected using 에. So, 나도 신에 의해, due to the god, I also, next chunk. Now looking at 원래 힘을 잃었고, 원래 can either be used as original or originally depending on context. It's technically not on Topic's top 1000 words list, but I figured I'd include it since I actually hear it quite a bit in the wild. 힘 is power, so 원래 힘, original power, and then 잃다 is to lose. So, ignoring go for a minute, I think of this middle line as, due to the god, I even lost my original power. Now, go means and, but specifically in the context of connecting sentences together. Take for example, I walked to school, it was cold, versus I walked to school and it was cold. Moving down to the third line, I'm actually going to be starting off with this as the first chunk, which looks super long, but bear with me, it'll make sense once we get through it. So again, 그렇게, in that way, or that is how, and then 여러 is many or several. So, 여러 세상, many worlds. Right now, I'm much more interested in this ending, done. The first thing to know about done is that it's actually a modifier, meaning this whole bit is actually being used to describe 우리, meaning we, or us, depending on context. The second thing to note about done is that it specifically expresses recollection, implying that the action it's referring to was done frequently. The third thing to note is that while done is technically already in past tense, preceding it with at explicitly tells us that the action has ended or used to occur. So this bit is kind of like, we who once transcended many worlds. In English, the phrasing alone is just so extra, but I don't think it holds the same dramatic weight in Korean. Moving on to this next chunk and starting with 이곳에, hopefully 이곳 is looking somewhat familiar at this point, and then 에 is the static counterpart to 에서. If you're actively doing something at a place, you'll want to use 에서, but if you just want to describe your existence there, then that's when you'll be using 에. Again, 묶이다, not very important to us right now, but 게 되다 is kind of like to end up doing something, so you don't really have a say in what's going on. In the traveler's case, carrying over 우리 for context, we ended up bound to this place. The ending G is used as reaffirmation, kind of like in English you might end a sentence with right or isn't it, only G is used much more freely. Alright, I'll shut up now. See you at the end of the cutscene.
그게 대체 얼마 전 일인지 모르겠어. 하지만 알아낼 방법을 찾을 거야. 깨어난 후 혼자 밖을 떠돌다가 2달 전 널 만난 거지.
그땐 정말 고마웠어. 네가 아니었으면 난 물속에서 익사했으려나. 그러니까 열심히 가이드해줄게. 출발할 때가 됐네. 가자.
Alright, now that we're finally at the end of that cutscene, let's roll back the tapes and go through it together. So for this bit, I'm just gonna focus on 얼마 전 일인지 모르겠어. First off, we have 얼마 as how much or how many, 전 being before, and then il meaning day. Already, you're probably thinking of this as how many days ago, or even a more generalized, how long ago. Jumping ahead a little bit here, moruda is to not know, and then inji moruda just connects to the first bit and explicitly expresses that you don't know what, when, who, etc. While moruges어 is technically in future tense, it's actually used to sound a little more polite. It's kind of like in English how we'll say we're not sure of something. So altogether, I'm not sure how long ago that was. Moving on, we start with 하지만, which just means but. Later down the line, we'll also be seeing the ending 지만 in the middle of sentences. It has the same meaning. 알아내다 is to find something out, but really you just need to know 알다, which is to know. This lil here is actually our future tense modifier, modifying 방법, meaning way. So 알아낼 방법, way to find out. Moving on, 찾다 is to find. My mom's constantly losing things, so I grew up hearing this one a lot. 을까야 may already look like future tense to you, which it is, and it specifically expresses I will do something. So altogether, in a nutshell, but I will find a way to find out. Which is kinda redundant in English, but again, in Korean, works just fine. Moving on and looking at this first bit, 깨어난 후, I'm just worried about who, which means after. In this case, that'll be after I woke up. Quick side note, if you ever hear anyone saying 오전 and 오후, that's AM and PM. Now for this next bit, 혼자 밖을 떠돌다가. Geez, say that 5 times fast. 혼자 is alone, and then 박 we've already seen before, just in a different context. Before we saw 박 as outside of something, now we see it as the outside, or the outdoors, the open. Again, jumping ahead a little bit here, 다가 can be thought of as verb 1 causing verb 2, or verb 2 ending verb 1. It's kind of like until, but specifically as a sentence connector. Putting this bit together, I wandered the outdoors alone until... next part. 2달 전 널 만난 거지. 2달 is 2 months, of course using the native Korean number 2 since we're counting. So 2달 전, 2 months ago. 널 is just a contraction of 너를, and I've noticed that words like I and you specifically tend to contract with their particles a lot, so be on the lookout for that. 만나다 is to meet, so this little bit is kind of like, 2 months ago I met you, didn't I? Again, just a quick recap. After I woke up, I wandered the outdoors alone until 2 months ago I met you, didn't I? Speaking of Paimon, let's get into some Paimon lines, starting with 그땐 정말 고마웠어. 때 is like time or moment, and this is looking like another particle contraction, so 그때, that time. 정말 is really, like when you're really happy, or in Paimon's case, really thankful, as 고맙다 is to be thankful or grateful. Typically, you'll see this in the present tense for when people want to say thank you, but I think Paimon here is saying that she was really thankful for that time. For this next bit, we're just gonna start with 네가 아니었으면. So first I'd actually like to point out how I'm pronouncing ni. On paper, this looks like it would be pronounced as ne, but that is actually how you would pronounce I with a subject particle. So to keep these two from becoming homophones and getting everything confused, they just change the pronunciation of one. We'll also see this later down the line with my and your, as they often get contracted and pronounced as ne and ni. 아니 is like not or no, and then this 음연 ending can either be used as if or when, depending on context. So 네가 아니었으면 is kind of like if it weren't for you. Moving on, 난 물속에서 익사했으려나. Again, 난 is just informal I with a topic particle contraction, so I would like to focus my energy on 물속에서. 물 is water, and then 속 is kind of like inside, among, amidst, you get the picture. Here, the ending 에서 indicates that there is a dynamic action happening in the water. You may remember last time I said 여기서 was a contraction. This is what it is. 여기 and 에서. We've also seen 에서 used in the context of meaning from, so a general rule I go by is that if it's followed by 가다 or 오다, that's how it's being used. Otherwise, it's being used to denote dynamic action. This little ending here is for wondering aloud, which again, if it's important, we'll see more of it. So altogether, Paimon saying, if it weren't for you, I would have drowned in the water. Moving on, Paimon continues with 그러니까 열심히 가이드해줄게. First off, 열심히다, I noticed my dictionary equates with to be enthusiastic, but I actually learned it to mean to be diligent, and this is generally how I interpret it. Now we've already seen the verb ending 주세요 meaning to please do something, so the slightly less formal 주다 ending just means to do something for someone. Furthermore, this ending 을게 really hammers in that you will do something for someone. Also, quick side note, back in the day when I was learning this stuff, I thought that uke and uka were the same thing, especially in their more polite forms. I thought one was just a shortened version of the other. It's not, they're different. Getting back on track, Paimon is just saying that she'll diligently guide us. Next, she goes, 출발할 때가 됐네. 가자. Starting with 출발하다, this is to leave or to depart, and you'll actually see this a lot in airports. So this little chunk, 출발할 때, is time to go. Now we've seen 되다 used in a few phrases already, but on its own it means to become. This little ne ending tacked on after it is kinda used to describe an emotional reaction to something, especially things like realization, surprise, admiration, etc. So here Paimon's kinda going, well, would you look at the time? Now this ja ending over here is kind of like, let's do something. So 가자 is just, let's go! Anyway, that seems like a pretty good stopping point for now. Hopefully my reading will get a little bit faster and more natural, and my cadence will improve, hopefully. Again, thanks for following along on my little journey here. Take care, and I'll see you across the eclectic. Bye-bye!